Hey everyone, welcome to Movie Marathon's HQ, where we do movie marathons connected to new releases and where we enjoy and review some of our favorite movies. This video is part of our Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon, where we are watching one movie every week as we prepare for the release of Avengers Doomsday in December 2026. Today we are discussing Blade. Released in 1998 and directed by Stephen Norrington, this was one of Marvel's first big-budget superhero movies. It also is not part of the MCU directly, but it does have a significant connection to another movie in the MCU, which will be discussed later. And so that's why it's here in this Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon. It's also placed here in the marathon out of chronological order. Up until this point, we've been following mostly chronological order. But because it's October, I wanted to include Blade, Blade 2, and Blade Trinity, and also Werewolf by Night, just to align with spooky season. Overall, I really liked this movie. I first saw it when I was much too young. I was at a friend's house, and he recommended to put it on, and we watched it, and I thought it was great. Rewatching it now, it is still a lot of fun. It's very memorable, and it mostly holds up. It was also really fun starting off October watching a vampire movie. And Blade really was ahead of its time. Spoilers ahead, because some of the positives and negatives will get into spoiler territory for Blade. For positives, I would mention the world building, the action scenes and CGI, and the character of Blade. For negatives, I would mention the R rating. The first positive that I'll mention is the world building. In this movie, we're introduced to a world where vampires have always existed, and they live amongst us secretly, but they also run a lot of society from the shadows. We are introduced to Blade, played by Wesley Snipes, and Abraham Whistler, played by Chris Christopherson, and they're a pair of vampire hunters who go from city to city, and they hunt and destroy any vampire happenings that are going on. So there's this legend of this vampire hunter that the vampires can't quite get away from. He's almost a boogeyman type character. And so as they go from city to city to discover what's going on, the audience gets to go alongside them and learn things at the same time as Blade. I think that's a fun way to do it versus he's always in one city with an excessive amount of vampires and this new thing kind of unfurled under his nose. I like this approach better, where they rove around trying to hunt vampires. They also introduce a lot of classic vampire lore and some new spins on it, and they do it in a way that's really plausible. And it is fantastical because it's vampires, but they take it super seriously, which really comes across. I like Blade being a daywalker, which is a fascinating concept, but we'll get into more of that later. So my first positive is the world building. I think they do a great job in this movie and sets things up for the two sequels as well. For another positive, I would mention the action scenes and the CGI. This is a classic 90s action movie with a lot of action, and it's very satisfying. Wesley Snipes is a very believable action star. He had done some action roles previous to this, but he just really throws himself in. And sure, there's probably stunt doubles in there for certain stunts, but it really feels like it's Wesley Snipes doing a lot of the action, and he sells it very well. The CGI for 1998 is also really, really good. There were a few moments when I thought, wow, that was CGI, but it totally fit. It totally worked. It was very impressive. The way that the vampires disintegrate into ash and fire and bones and stuff looked good every time. There's one point where one of the characters turns into a blood god, and that CGI doesn't really work. It's cool what they tried to do, it just doesn't look great. But they do tons of other action and CGI work that looks really good. Even the physics-defying stunts and jumping across buildings and superhero landings, it all looks really, really good. So I thought the action is a lot of fun, and the CGI looked great, especially for the time. A positive that I've mentioned is the character of Blade. This might not be the most conventional starting point for a franchise, but Blade is a really interesting character from the comics. He has all of the strengths of the vampires with none of the weaknesses except for the thirst for blood, which he resists. In this movie, it establishes that he suppresses it by use of a serum, but his body is building a resistance to the serum. So he kind of has this little side thing that is going on where he's trying to not give in to this thirst for blood, but at the same time the serum isn't working, they need to figure something else out. They introduce a new character who happens to be a hematologist, and she's kind of our entry point into this new world as well. And so she kind of helps with that dilemma. But Blade goes through a great character arc. And I also want to mention that he is just dripping with coolness. Throughout this whole movie, he is so cool. He has a swagger about him that is so strong. Kids nowadays might call it aura farming. There's lots of scenes where Blade enters or exits the scene doing a cool pose that's kind of meant for nobody but him and us as the audience. But it really is just cool. There's also a classic line that he says towards the end of the movie where he refers to certain people who are always trying to ice skate uphill. It doesn't really make sense, but it sounds so cool. Blade is a really fascinating and charismatic character to have in this movie, so it's a really great introduction to him, and it plants some seeds for some other things in the later movies, so he's a great character. For a negative, I'll just mention the R rating. I'm not a fan of R-rated movies in general. I understand that some stories are more adult in nature, but for me, I don't really see how graphic violence, strong language, overt sexuality really improves storytelling above what is allowed in PG-13. So I generally don't prefer rated R movies. In this movie, the R rating is very well deserved. There's lots of profanity and lots of blood and guts and gore. As it is a vampire movie, you would expect that. But that might dissuade some viewers from seeing this movie. So that's a negative. But really, otherwise, I think this movie's pretty great. Now, how might Blade connect to Avengers Doomsday? I don't think it will. These three Blade movies have always been standalone with no other connection, and in 2019, Marvel Studios announced a new version of Blade played by Mahershala Ali. However, it's been 6 years and that movie has not been made. It's gone through multiple directors and multiple writers and still is not on the release list anywhere. So it's unlikely that version would make an appearance either. But in 2024 in Deadpool and Wolverine, Wesley Snipes did reprise the role of Blade in that movie, which blew me away in the theaters. It's unclear whether that Blade in that movie is the same as the Blade in these three movies. Also, Wesley Snipes is not confirmed for the cast list of Avengers Doomsday, so I think it's doubtful that we'll see this Blade again, and I don't think any of the secondary characters will appear in Doomsday either. So that's my review of Blade. What did you think of this movie, and how do you think it may connect to Avengers Doomsday? Make sure to let me know in the comments. Follow Movie Marathon's HQ on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, and also on Letterboxd, where you can see all 5 versions of the Avengers Doomsday Movie Marathon. See you at the movies!